What is up, guys? Today we're going to be taking a look at several builds that I believe would be relatively friendly for people who are new to one down. Making a build, especially for one down, can, in theory, be a little bit overwhelming. There's a lot of variables you have to take into consideration, weapons to bring, and so on and so forth. So the ones I'm going to be covering today, I'm not going to say are overpowered or anything like that, because they're not, but they are very useful builds, and they do pretty much everything in them has some sort of purpose, and we'll go ahead and start talking about that with this first one. We're using the MUI. Oh, I forgot to mention that these are no DLC builds as well, making all of these centered around not having DLC. Having DLC can optimize these builds a little bit more and give you some extra options depending on what DLC you have access to, but just due to the amount of players that we gained here in the past several weeks, whenever Payday 2 was free there for a while, I am under the impression that most of the, probably a great deal of the active players might not have access to any DLC, so that's why I'm making this video like that. So regardless, when we're looking at the ISMA, we are using the triple-aught buckshot, and yes, before you say, oh, but that was part of the gauge shotgun pack, you have a limited amount of buckshot in the base game that you have available to you. Of course, you can just flat out use it on any shotgun you want if you have the shotgun pack. However, if you don't have the shotgun pack, you have a limited amount that you can use for your shotguns, 1 or 2, I believe. Okay, and so with that, we are also using the Silent Killer suppressor, using a concealment boost modifier, and we're using the skeletal stock. I'm not using a sight or attaching any other non-DLC attachments simply because I want to keep the concealment low for the ISMA, especially when we're pairing it with the Krinkov, which we're using the low profile suppressor with a concealment boost modifier and a skeletal stock for. Again, I'm skipping out on a lot of modifications, I mean, simply because a lot of them are DLC, and any of them that aren't DLC and might add something like stability would decrease our concealment, which we're needing for this build because we are using rogue. Using electrical brass knuckles as the melee, concussion grenades as the throwable, doctor bag deployable. Of course, said that dodge was the perk deck, so let's go ahead and take a look at the build itself. Of course, we're running Inspire Ace and Combat Doctor for very obvious purposes. Inspire Ace to revive your teammates from afar. Combat Doctor because the more doctor bags all one down is typically the better. However, if you coordinate with your teammates and they deem it's appropriate, you can also bring first aid kits as opposed to doctor bags. That's probably that little bit is probably just preference for the most part, or coordination with your team or what have you. Over an Enforcer, we have shotgun CQB, just because I think the dry reload time on the ISMA can be a bit aggravating, particularly if you don't pair it with close by ace, which puts 15 more shells in the ISMA's magazine, taking it from a 7 capacity magazine to a 22 capacity magazine, which makes a gigantic difference in the amount of time you spend shooting versus the amount of time you spend reloading, which is also why we pick up shotgun CQB. Of course, we also pick up Overkill Basic to increase the overall DPS of the ISMA. Do pick up Resilience Ace to reduce the visual effect of flashbangs, Bullseye Basic in order to armor gate, and pick up Shock and Awe Ace because neither of our weapons are armor piercing, and so we will use the ISMA to shoot shields, or we can melee them with the electrical brass knuckles head on and make the shields fall over so that we can shoot them. We don't have anything in the Technician tree. In the Ghost tree, of course, we have basic setup for a dodge build, picking up Duck and Cover Ace, Sneaky Bastard Ace. I picked up Shockproof Ace because it is one of my preferred skills to have. Inner Pockets Basic also helps with the concealment that we have, putting us just under 25 concealment so we can get the maximum benefits from Low Blow and Sneaky Bastard. If you didn't want to use Shockproof, although I would typically recommend it on one down because tasers holding you in place in the open for anything longer than a second or two can be absolutely devastating. You you could probably redo it like this, although you pick up Parkour Ace, which means you can run and reload, which is kind of nice, and then Inner Pockets Ace is really just there so you can get up to the next part of the tier because you won't be wearing a ballistic vest with this particular loadout, regardless. Also picking up Optical Illusions Ace so you can increase the concealment of this build overall. Without it, the concealment does boost up to 35, and you actually won't be getting any benefits whatsoever from Low Blow and Sneaky Bastard, except for maybe like 1 point or something. No, you don't pick up any because the dodge doesn't change here. So Optical Illusion Ace is a must. Low Blow Ace, of course, we already discussed. And Specialized Killing Basic didn't have enough points after putting in an Optical Illusions Ace to pick up Specialized Killing Ace. And then the Fugitive Tree had 9 lives. I don't think Specialized Killing Ace is really going to be a necessity for this build in terms of DPS. However, if it bothered you really badly that you couldn't get Specialized Killing Ace, then you could do what I did before when I did this, and then over in Tank you could rework the build like so, and it will save you 2 points, and you should be able to get Specialized Killing. However, like I said, I don't believe Specialized Killing Ace is really going to help you with any sort of damage breakpoints, so you're not actually doing yourself any favors by picking up Specialized Killing Ace as far as my knowledge goes. Of course, as you can see, you do have 4 points left over just to put wherever you want. Maybe you want to put it in Scavenger, maybe you want to put it in Stable Shot, and I don't know, just whatever you want. There's just 4 points left over. You can literally just put anywhere. You can get Swan Song Basic, I guess. I didn't try to get Swan Song in this build because I do believe a lot of players use it as a crutch. It is a very handy skill, however, it's also kind of a busted skill in a sense. And I firmly believe that playing one down without Swan Song, and actually even without using Converteds, will definitely make you stronger as a player overall. Regardless, this gives you all the tools that you need in order to combat enemies of any type. And what do I mean by that? The Yzma will allow you to take out specials, special units, you know, such as tasers, medics, shields, and so forth, all very quickly. However, it doesn't have the range, or really, I mean, it does have the DPS to deal with dozers, or the fire rate rather, to deal with dozers. However, that is why we're packing the Krinkov. The Krinkov will allow us to be able to shoot snipers, although we have a accuracy rating of 60. By spraying at a sniper or by getting in close range with the dozer, we should be able to just hold down the trigger and you know, hope for the best, more or less. It also allows us to give to switch to our secondary weapon in case we run out of ammo with the Yzma, or not ammo, run out of ammo in the magazine with the Yzma, and we just need a bit of a backup gun. All right, so let's go ahead and take a quick peek at what some gameplay with this particular build looks like. So from the get-go, something I should have mentioned is the fact that all of the rogue builds that you see me using in this video are going to be interchangeable with Sicario, seeing as how that is another free perk deck. You'll also notice that I'm using the AI during all these heists, simply because these are made to be team-oriented builds, and I didn't have any friends ready at the moment, so I just decided to do it with AI instead. That being said, let's go ahead and talk about this particular weapon loadout in this particular build. So this particular build, of course, utilizes dodge and utilizes the Yzma for its incredible DPS, and also uses the Krinkov for its incredible DPS. Although the Krinkov doesn't have very good ammo efficiency in its own right, and it's kind of hard to use the Krinkov as its own you know, set-apart weapon, especially if you're using it in an auto-fire mode. The Yzma you can definitely use as, well, of course as it is, a primary weapon. The pickup on the Yzma is very strong, especially in correlation to the amount of kills that you get per shot. Combined with the fact that this build has crits on it, makes the Yzma a killing machine. And, you know, just due to the number of shots that you have to pump into an enemy normally in order to kill them, combined with the fact of, you know, your critical hit chance and all that good stuff, it just makes the Yzma extremely effective at killing basically all types of units, dozers included, if the face plate is broken. And it actually isn't, you know, a terrible weapon against dozers. However, we do bring the Krinkov with us because it does have a bit more close quarters DPS ability. Now, one of the worst things about this build is probably the fact that the Krinkov can be modified to have much better accuracy or stability due to the way that we've had to spend our skill points in order to make ourselves as a player a little more beefy and deal a little bit more damage, in terms, of course, in low blow and sneaky bastard aced. However, that does not mean that the Krinkov is by any means a bad choice. In fact, I think it's one of the better free options that you could put with this build in particular. Of course, there are other better secondary options, and we'll cover a few of those as this video goes on with these, pre-made builds. As I was going back and people have continued to make comments on some of my old one-down tips videos, I guess I never really quite thought that perhaps a lot of the things that people struggle with maybe isn't, just picking the perk deck you want to use, or just picking, what weapons you want to use, or whatever, but doing everything in combination can sometimes be a bit of an undertaking if you don't know exactly what's going on, and sometimes it's nice to just have somebody say, here, this is something good to start off with that isn't super specialized and isn't made to do one particular thing. This is just kind of a very well-rounded build as far as I'm concerned. You have good DPS, you have decent survivability with dodge, you have maximum dodge chance from rogue and all that good stuff. And of course some values are changed a little bit because I'm using the AI and you won't have those, but the changes are mostly minimal. I just kind of wanted to simulate what it'd be like to have a team as opposed to trying to use this for solo. So the Krinkov is pretty good for killing snipers, even with its lowered accuracy. Typically, just spraying in the general direction of the sniper seems to do pretty good, considering if you land a lucky headshot, they should die in one shot. And even if they don't, it only takes 3 body shots to kill them with the current. Or no, I'm sorry, it takes 4. It almost takes 3 if it did a little more damage, but. Thankfully I have the AI with me and didn't have to worry about that sniper downing me. All in all, I do feel like this build is very efficient. Again, you kind of have to use the Krinkov a little more sparingly. You can't use it as your main tool for killing things because although it has the damage to do so, it just doesn't have the ability to upkeep the ammo well enough, which is why we have the Yzma. And I haven't really got to showcase it much, but of course, concussion grenades are used to move from area to area and stun enemies long enough for you to get a bunch of kills. Or, utilizing... I completely lost my train of thought because somebody sent me a message and I was reading it. My apologies. Anyway, using concussion grenades to move from cover to cover, and also using shock and awe ace to kill shields. It's probably not as effective as using, like, a sniper rifle or an explosive or... etc., etc. There are, of course, 2 free grenades currently, if I'm not mistaken, like actual grenades, explosive grenades, and then of course concussion grenades, incendiary grenades, and then there are, the throwing cards. I didn't pick any of the others because the concussion grenades are a very good utility, and basically just the weapons that we use already cover all the bases that we want to cover. We can kill shields, we can kill snipers, we can kill dozers, and of course we can kill tasers and medics and so forth, and we can kill regular units fairly quickly as well. So it's just a very well-rounded build, and even with the lack of converts and the lack of Swan Song, I think if you really just focus on, playing intelligently, using cover when you need to, getting behind cover when your armor breaks, so on and so forth, it's pretty easy to go about stuff. So now we'll look at the armorer variation of this build. Again, we're using the Yzma and we're using the Krinkov. However, we are able to modify them slightly differently because we're no longer worried about our detection. We're still using buckshot. We're still using the silent killer suppressor. However, we did switch out the modifier for a stability modifier. The tactical Russian rail, the assault light, not really for any particular reason, just because assault light. Put a side on it to increase stability, and then the standard stock again to increase stability. Then for the Krinkov, we put on the bigger and the better suppressor, giving us more accuracy and stability. Of course, we gave it the accuracy buff modifier. Gave it the Moscow special rail for extra stability. The tactical laser module, because I know people like their tactical lasers. Another scope in order to add stability, and tactical stock in order to add stability. Still using the EKB melee and concussion grenade throwables. However, we are, of course, wearing the ICTV armor. We're still using Dr. Bags, and we're using the Armorer perk deck. Let's go ahead and take a look at these skills. So, same thing going on in the medic tree. Nothing has changed there, and really that won't change between any of these builds, except for maybe one. Who knows? Same thing in Shotgunner, except we picked up Overkill Aced. Why pick up Overkill Aced? Because it increases your weapon swap speed, which isn't really that important. However, the damage bonus is applied to your other weapon, meaning that as you're getting kills with your Yzma, during the times that Overkill is active, the Krinkov will also be getting a 75% damage boost. In its current state, where it is doing 106.6 damage, that will increase to, I typed it in wrong, to 186.55, which actually does help it pass by some damage breakpoints. So, we also picked up Steady Grip to get some increased weapon accuracy. I still have Shockproof Aced in this build because, of course, I really like it. We got the Professional Ace in order to pick up some extra stability and accuracy for our guns, and then, of course, we still have 9 lives. I have one skill point left over. I'm probably just going to put that in Scavenger. And we're going to go ahead and show off this variation of the build. So I'm sure the first line of thought for people seeing that I got Overkill Aced was the fact that, oh, why is he getting Overkill Aced? That's a completely useless skill and you don't need it. And blah, 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 blah. Well, due to the lack of crits on this build, the Krinkov, although still good at killing dozers, whatever help it can get in speeding up the process, it definitely doesn't hurt, especially since we had a bunch of points left over. If you really didn't want Overkill Aced, you could probably take it out and put it somewhere else. However, it does mitigate the effectiveness of the Krinkov ever so slightly when you're trying to just pull more raw DPS out of it. Regardless, this is just, of course, the Armorer variation of the build we just used before. It's using the same weapons, and it's the same general principles, and all the weapons are here for the same thing. However, of course, it's just meant for an armor playstyle. Armor, of course, being what I would consider the king of consistency, right up there with Anarchist, and all that stuff. If you just don't like the way you have to play dodge and the way you have to rely on RNG basically and things of that nature, and you'd much rather just use armor, then this, of course, would be the preferred build of choice. As far as like the effectiveness of the two builds goes, it's more or less just preference, I would say. I really can't say that one perk deck is superior over the other. I really do think it, as I said, it just comes down to preference. I guess you could say that without basing anything on luck, Armorer would technically be better, but at the same time, like, partial luck or luck and good decision making are what makes Rogue so strong. Just the fact that you have such a high chance to just completely take no damage whatsoever. We've talked about this a bunch of times before on this channel, so I won't go into all that. But it's basically just going to be the same stuff for this build. We really haven't added or changed anything that's going to significantly affect the way we play, except for the fact that we're going to have to consistently pump more bullets into enemies because we don't have crits. We didn't pick up anything like Unseen Strike or whatever in order to get crits or anything like that. And of course, we couldn't have got crits if we got low blow. However, you really don't notice the change too much. I mean, you notice that you have to pump enemies full of, the same number of shots consistently, as opposed to just shooting them once or twice and then they randomly dying when normally it should take, 3, 4, 5. But see, Krinkov just obliterated that dozer. Oh, it feels so good just to get right up in their face, hold down the trigger, and then they just melt. It's fantastic. So this weapon combination is really strong, like I said, in the in the rogue part of this build. The only real weaknesses I can think of it is just a bit of inconsistency when it comes to using shock and awe ace, because it's not necessarily buggy, it's just kind of wonky due to the rate of fire of the Yzma and how it constantly hits the shields and causes them to bounce around, so it can cause them to do this weird clipping issue where like their shield is horizontal through their body, and it just looks weird. It can sometimes make it a little bit difficult to get the shots you want to make, but a pretty minor thing no less. If a shield is in melee range, of course, you can just knock them over and go about your day. With the melee weapon, of course, I mean. But for the most part, you know, this weapon combination just melts through enemies. You're really not going to have much trouble dealing with these. And the best part about it, of course, is, you know, as I said in the beginning of this video, this is all DLC free. You know, this is something that every single player has access to. You might not have immediate access to the mods and things like that. However, via buying them with Continental coins, or using the offshore casino, or, you know, just grinding out jewelry store on normal with an ECM and doing it in like under 30 seconds or whatever, you know, you can get the mods necessary for this, and, you know, anybody can. There's no paywall involved except for owning the game, which is something I really like about these builds. And I actually found these to be really fun, limiting myself in a way that I couldn't just use explosives and so forth. Had to not necessarily be creative, but I had to think of ways to cover all the bases like I normally would, instead of usually just cheaping out to a grenade launcher or something like that. Which, that being said, the Yzma and shotguns in general in this game are extremely friendly to use due to their mechanics. So these builds are also easy to use, I think would be a nice thing to say about them. You know, it doesn't require a lot of technical it doesn't take a lot of technical skill to play this build because just of how the Yzma works as a shotgun. But in spite of all that, let's go ahead and take a look at the next build that we're going to be using. Our next build is going to be another one that works with either Rogue or Sicario, depending on your preferences. And so this one is actually going to center around using pistols. This is going to be a bit of a hybrid. It's going to look a little bit similar to my Sicario build I did not too terribly long ago, if I'm not mistaken. Anyway, we're using the Akimbo Castigo revolvers, and we're using the 5.7 AP pistol. The Akimbo Castigo revolvers have an accuracy bonus and the cruise grip, as well as the Diablo barrel. The 5.7 has the tin treated barrel, has the Champion's suppressor, concealment boost modifier, and an extended magazine. We do still make use of the EKB melee and using the concussion grenades, 2-piece suit, Dr. Bag. In this particular instance, I'm going to be using Rogue. Again, Mastermind tree looks the same. Our Enforcer tree still has Resilience aced and Bullseye basic, however, we don't need Shock and Awe aced. I think there are the points left over if you took it out of like Scavenger and Transporter to pick up Shock and Awe basic if you wanted it. However, I wouldn't call it a necessity. I had some spare points and I threw those into Scavenger aced and Transporter. The Technician tree, we're using Jack of all trades aced because of the slight ammo inefficiency of our weapons. That will allow us to pack an ammo bag secondary. I also picked up Steady Grip ace to increase the accuracy of our two weapons, raising them up to 96 accuracy and 80 accuracy respectively, both of which are good accuracies. Again, we have a similar build as we did in the Ghost Tree for the first build, except we're not using Optical Illusions, Low Blow, and Sneaky Bastard aced. Those skills are all basic because they don't need to be aced. Our detection rating is 3, therefore we get maximum benefits just from having Sneaky Bastard and Low Blow basic, and since we're already at 3 detection, having Optical Illusions aced doesn't serve us any good whatsoever. And then in the Fugitive Tree, of course, we have 9 lives aced again. And this time we have Gun Nut ace to increase our fire rate, Akimbo ace to increase our ammo capacity with the Castigos, Desperado ace to increase our overall reload time, and Trigger Happy basic in order to increase our DPS to pretty decent amounts, actually, especially if we're using, well, either of the pistols. Okay. Now then, let's go ahead and take a quick look at this build. So this build caters to an ever so slightly different method of play. It's a bit more, or a bit less user-friendly, I should say, than the Yzma build, simply because the Yzma was just kind of point in general direction, click, and things die. And it was also really easy to do crowd control. A little bit less so with this particular loadout, however, it also does good damage. It's very easy to take out shields, take out snipers, take out bulldozers, so on and so forth. The combination of trigger happy and having crits cleaves through any sort of enemies with you know, higher health values, of course, for example, dozers, medics, tasers, and so forth. However, one of the downsides to this build is the ammo consumption of both of these guns. Neither of them have astonishing pickup. Not terrible, and you could probably, if you were able to, you know, get frequent ammo pickups and things of that nature, you could maintain it pretty well over the course of a period of time. However, you would probably need to be sure to pack an ammo bag, either primary or secondary, just to be able to maintain your ammo like you would need to be able to. Definitely don't want to run out of ammo in the middle of a firefight and all that good stuff. Of course, I mean, that you don't want that to happen with any weapon, of course, but with these two, it's a little more prone to happen. However, they're both extremely powerful weapons. The way we have them modded and the way our skills are set up, they're both extremely accurate. 80 accuracy, I wouldn't say is extremely accurate, but it of course is on the higher end of the scale. I think its base accuracy is around 60. It might even just be 60, but. And then of course 92 for the Castigos is nothing to laugh at either. And if you don't miss, you tear through enemies pretty quickly. I got too used to using the shotguns. It happens to me a lot, I have to admit. I get too used to pointing in the general direction and shooting. Regardless. Of course, this build does, you know, center around either Dodgers either Rogue or Sicario, and it is quite similar to my Sicario, or my Sangres, yeah, my Sangres build that I did not too long ago, where I used triple pistols and all that good stuff, except instead of using the 5.7, I used the other Castigo revolver. Of course, that just adds a little bit of extra utility. It has a larger magazine capacity of 5.7, of course, and it can also, you know, penetrate through shields. It's really the only super major change about the build, honestly. I just wanted to highlight that it is, you know, maybe this one is a little bit less beginner-friendly for one-down purposes. However, it's definitely still an easy one to use. Probably not as easy as the Yzma and Krinkov setup, but it's still a really good one just due to the amount of damage that you're putting out and things of that nature. If you're confident in your aim and you like using pistols, I would definitely give this one a try. I had a lot of fun with it, for sure. The 5.7 isn't actually a pistol that I use too terribly often, just because, I don't know, I just don't, for some reason. I guess just because of the ammo consumption, but it is a fun little gun to use. One thing to note, though, is in order to get the 5.7, in order to use the Champion Suppressor, you do have to be following the Payday 2 community page, because they're considered community items. They're not technically DLC because they're free. You can access them for free. You don't have to pay to join the community. You just have to follow the page. So if you're not following the page, you're not going to be able to have this gun. But literally, all you have to do is just go to go to the Payday 2 community group, hit the follow button somewhere on the page, and it unlocks a bunch of free content for you in the game. More than just the 5.7, you unlock 2 or 3 grenade types, just a bunch of different stuff. So if you haven't done that, it's definitely worth checking out. I did end up going down a whole lot in this particular run because I was acting dumb, just running around all over the place, just wanting to go ham and shoot things like a maniac. But all in all, this build ever so slightly less user-friendly, but still just as fun and still just as useful as the first two builds. And the next build we'll look at is going to be another armor build, so let's go ahead and take a quick peek at that. And our final build is going to be another armorer build, this time utilizing the M308 and the locomotive. For mods on the M308, we're using the bigger the better suppressor, a stability modifier. Oh, whoops. I'm not supposed to be using the LED combo. Shame on me. The surgeon sight and the Jaeger body. And then for the locomotive, we are using the triple aught buckshot. We are using the silent killer suppressor, the pro grip, extended magazine, ACOG sight, the police shorty stock, and the shell rack. Of course, most of these other things are pretty standard and have stayed the same. Now, the mastermind tree, of course, medic is the same. However, we did pick up aggressive reload basic so that we could reload the M308 a little bit faster. We also picked up some pretty standard shotgun skills so we can make good use of our locomotive using close by ace so that we can fire it faster. Shock and awe aced again, one so we can get up to Iron Man aced, and so we have the ability to knock over shields with our melee and with our locomotive, and even with our M308. Scavenger ace in order to help with some ammo efficiency. Also picked up Surefire basic, so that the M308 gets 15 extra bullets in the mag, getting it up to 25 as opposed to just plain 10. Also again have Shockproofed aced, Specialized Killing aced, and 9 lives aced. Alright, now let's go ahead and take a look at this build. So this build, by far, was probably my favorite part of making this video. For several reasons. So, one of the first reasons is because it works really well. I get to use the M308. M308, for some reason, is just a really fun gun to use. Just feels good to shoot, feels good to kill things with, you know, the whole shebang. And not only that, but this build is also a callback to the very, early days of Payday 2, like back when the game was first released, when Overkill was still the highest difficulty. You know, back when, actually using the Car 4, or I believe it was the Car 4, unless it may have been something else at the time, I can't quite remember. I believe it was the Car 4 and the Loco, and using that was kind of the meta. Running, as we called them, Master Forcer builds, or Tech Forcer builds, you know, going up the Mastermind tree or the Technician tree, or going up the Enforcer tree and the Mastermind tree. Gosh, it was a lot of fun. It's definitely interesting. Or, wait, I said Tech Forcer, so that should be Technician and Enforcer, not Enforcer and Mastermind, I believe that's what I said. Or, that was the first one. Whatever. You know what I'm trying to say. One was Mastermind and Enforcer, and the other was Enforcer and Technician. And you went up Enforcer so you could get armor, because dodge wasn't a thing at the time, because we didn't have perk decks, we only had tier bonuses, and yeah, gosh, it's a Payday history lesson for those who don't know. This was back in 2013. The game was, it was an entirely different game then. Regardless, the build is so much fun to use. The M308 is a DMR that every player has access to. I believe it's the only free DMR. Not the best DMR by any stretch of the imagination, however the other DMRs are all DLC. You could use a Platypus Sniper as a form of DMR, however it doesn't necessarily have the same rate of fire as the M308, which we utilize in order to kill bulldozers. Locomotive also does a really good job of just taking out enemies, of course. It's a very strong shotgun, has a decent rate of fire when combined with close by, so long as you're not aiming down the sights. Of course, I put the sight on it, not because I wanted to use the sight, but because I just wanted the stability it offered in order to just improve the weapon's stats as much as I possibly could. There's really not a whole lot to say about this weapon combination. It's similar I don't want to say similar to the first setups we were using when we were using the Yzma and the Krinkov. It sort of is, but it sort of isn't. Both of these weapons can be used as your primary killing tools. They both have decent ammo pickup, and it's actually encouraged to interchange frequently between them, so you can use the M308 until you get about halfway down with your ammo, and then you switch to the locomotive and all that good stuff. For certain enemy types, it's better to use one over the other. For shields, you'll probably want to use your locomotive to knock them over with the force of the shotgun and all that good stuff. And then for dozers, you're going to use the M308, as well as with snipers, you're going to want to use the M308. So, but overall, I just found this build so much fun to use, and I'll probably actually use it with more team play with my friends, just because I liked this weapon loadout. I'll probably rework it to where I use it with Anarchists as opposed to Armor. Not that I have anything against Armor, I just find it more suited to me to play Anarchist. However, I didn't do any Anarchist builds in this video, of course, because Anarchist is DLC. So, I definitely didn't feel like I had trouble killing enemies at any point. I did find myself wishing from time to time that the locomotive had a bit of a faster fire rate, but you can replace it with some other more high rate of fire secondary shotguns if you have the DLC. However, the locomotive, unless you have DLC, is the only secondary shotgun, if I'm not mistaken, except for the Judge. But the Judge's ammo pickup just isn't something we really want to mess with. But theoretically speaking, you probably could replace it with a Judge and get similar results. In terms of killing things, you'll kill them extremely well, extremely quickly. However, keeping up your ammo will be a bit more difficult, and you have to rely on the M308 a bit more in order to keep up your ammo reserves. And in terms of long play, if there was no access to ammo bags, you'd probably be hard-pressed to try to, like I was saying, keep your ammo up and all that good stuff. But I had a great time using these two weapons. For show. So kind of just generally wrapping up everything that we've talked about thus far. These, how many builds did I do? 1, 2, 3, I guess it's 4. These 4 builds centered around, Armor and Rogue, and of course Sicario, if you want to use Sicario in replacement of Rogue, are all very suitable builds for one down. If you're experienced, you can use these builds. Even if you have DLC, you can use these builds and you can improve them to some extent, or just use different weapons or whatever, have more variety in the mods that you can use on the weapons and things of that nature. But of course, primarily this video was targeted towards newer players who want to get into one down, or maybe who struggle getting into one down, but don't really know where to start. Maybe they've seen, like, okay, I know these weapons are good, I know this perk deck is good, I know these skills and these builds are good, but have a hard time putting all the pieces together into something that works. And of course, there are tons and tons of builds on YouTube, not just by myself, but also from other YouTubers who focus on making actual build videos. People like Beecroft, General McBadass, people like that. And there are tons of others. Striler does videos with builds and stuff. There's a bunch of people. However, I really wanted to target these and make these, not just one build where it's like, use this build if you're new to one down, but offer, 4 builds with some variety, using different perk decks, using different loadouts, play styles, and so on and so forth, that still don't require you to use DLC and are all very fun to use and are all very effective. And so with that, guys, we'll bring this to a close. And as usual, thank you so much for watching.